My name is Johnny Apodaca. I've lived here on the Monterey Peninsula since 1972, at a sweet young age of 17. And I was just thinking recently, it's been about almost 40 years. And I went to a small art school in San Antonio, Texas called the McNay Art Institute, and had a very good art professor. I think if you do go to art school, one of the most important things is to have a good teacher, a kind of professor that will inspire you for your whole life, the rest of your life. So it's been, 40 years on, and I'm still inspired and excited to make art. His name was Reginald Rowe. So from there, I came here to the Monterey Peninsula because my brothers were here, stationed in Fort Ord, and lived in Pacific Grove. I went to MPC. When you go to art school, you study like the major artists, all the important figures, and you think, well, you're going to be famous too when you get out of there. But then, of course, life happens, and 40 years goes by, and you're still not famous. But I've been in the area for all these years, and I love art. Certainly have been wanting to participate and be part of local art history. One of the things my training was, my teacher is to become part of local regional art history. So that's been my goal for all these years, and hopefully I think I've done that. My original training was in the abstract expressionist training. De Kooning, Richard Diebenkorn, artists like that, Philip Guston. But then when I came to the Monterey Peninsula on the California coast, I fell in love with the landscape. And I remember in the 70s, I had my French easel and I was on the cliff sides of Big Sur, just painting magnificent landscapes, dramatic landscapes of the California coast. I enjoy the writings of the poet Robertson Jeffers. His poetry inspired in me a sense of drama. Living on the coast, it's very dramatic. It's life and death and the hawk and the stone and the rock. So all my paintings, I tried to instill drama in keeping with the California coast, the Monterey Peninsula. So all these years, about 30 years, I fell in love with the landscape and painted the landscape in plein air. Got a job, worked for 25 years, recently retired. Although working on my career as a painter all those years, many collections around the area. Recently, I did get something into the local Monterey Museum of Art in the permanent collection. I was really proud of that, a nice triptych. A little alarm went off inside my head that said that I did what I was trained to do finally all these years, was to become part of regional art history. So, okay, boom, I did what my teacher, had me do, instilled in me to do, and it was great. So then, okay, I did that, and now I wanted to go back to my original abstract expressionist training from 30 years ago, almost 40 years ago, which I love. And I tell people that the abstract expression training is like my father and the California landscape is like my mother. And I love them both. All along, I wanted to do a contemporary stylings, drips, anything I could think of to enliven the California landscape. My job is to add to the conversation of the California landscape, to become part of the continuation of a tradition, but not stay like the tradition like they painted 100 years ago. My job is to add to it and bring something to the conversation. So my thing was color, arbitrary color, and drips. So my abstract training enlivens the landscape. It's a good marriage, and so now it's a blend of the both. And probably in reality, my paintings are mostly abstracts relating to the landscape. What I try to instill in an abstract painting that has the language of the landscape in is I need an iconic image. And for me, the iconic image in this area is the mountain of Mount Toro. A mountain is symbolic of a man or just a great icon. An iconic image like that, I can lay on all different kinds of colors and colors that I've learned and seen and been absorbed by on the Monterey Peninsula all these years. Again, that goes back to the drama of living on the coast. And I can do many, many, many different things with the color. And that's my major interest anyway. In the gallery we have in Carmel, I've got my paintbrushes. I don't clean them out because they're inexpensive paintbrushes from the hardware store. So I leave them with all the color on them, and I have at least 1,000 paintbrushes. And I hang them from the ceiling, I put them on doorknobs, I hang them around the doors. It's because I love color. So these paintbrushes are the memory of all these colors I've painted, and they're big brushes. They're wide brushes, 4 inches, 3 inches. It's just something I learned in school. So color is my main point of interest. That's the most powerful, important thing about my painting is color. I've learned through the years that color, of course, is very personal, and it's very emotionally latent tool to work with as a painter. And one thing I've also learned is that every individual has their own unique color palette within them. And I think that most painters have it from the beginning when they start, when they're young, to the same color palette when they're old. It's been my observation anyway. So I've had students and I tell them, what you have to do is you have to paint from your gut and not think. It's not about thinking when you're painting. You have to feel it. You just have to be there in the moment. So if it's a blue sky and you reach down to your palette and you see pink and you say, don't question it, just respond to it and do that. And then your color, your life's color will come out on the canvas, and that's what you want. You want your paintings to be unique to you. You don't want them to be like, you know, Cezanne's or Vincent van Gogh's or anybody else's color. And you don't have to even try. It's just natural. I mean, I'm always exploring it and learning new colors of my own. You can get into grays, beautiful tones that are just gorgeous, and work with color harmonies. It's a worthy struggle, you know, and the secret I've learned is not to quit, not to give up. Because if you give up, you don't reach that, you don't have the, you give up the opportunity of reaching the pinnacle of this mountain that you're climbing. So if you give up in between, because it's too hard, it's too cold, or you're too tired, it's too windy, I mean, that's difficult, especially here on the coast. My most favorite time of painting was in Point Lobos, and it was windy and cold, and I wanted to go home, and I had my foot was on my hat, and a rock was in the French easel so it wouldn't blow over. But I was working on this piece, and if I would have quit anywhere along the way until I got over the hill, the hump, the summit, I wouldn't have had anything to show for it. And because it was so difficult, and so beautifully difficult, it's probably one of my favorite paintings. And I have seen it in the racks of the Monterey Museum. It's got a beautiful gold leaf frame, which is a homage and a look back to the California painters. My favorite and best painting experiences are ones that I have when I'm painting plein air, and then I surprise myself. I surprise myself with the color. That's where it's really exciting, because I don't want to do something that's expected. An artist isn't really doing his job if he's giving you something that's cliched and that's what the buyer or the observer expects to see. The artist is doing his job when he surprises himself, and it's a great surprise, and it's beautiful, unexpected. I mean, that's the thrill. That's what it's all about, is to discover something. You do that by giving up, emptying yourself out, being in the moment, being alive and enriched. My teacher used to say, think of yourself as an alien that's just landed on the earth, and you've never seen the earth before, you don't know anything about trees and wind and blue sky. He said, and the door opens up, he said, if you're an alien, you know, your antennas come up and you're just like taking it all in. He said, that's how you have to be as a painter, as an artist. You know, it's like this is the first time you've seen a tree, you know, so you're just enthralled with that and you're excited about that, and it's a wonderful thing. So that's the idea of how I paint. Hopefully I'll continue to be surprised. I mean, it's really what a painter lives for. And those moments don't come all the time, very rare and very few. I mean, sometimes you just disappear, and then you come back to yourself 15 minutes later, 30 minutes later, whatever, and then you realize, and then you look at what you were doing, and then you realize it's like, wow, this is really good. But it didn't come from me. That's when it comes through you, you know. So you have to let down all the guards and experience. Luckily, after 30 years of painting, all that experience just makes you relax and comfortable, and you know what to do. You know how to apply paint and the texture, and the things are going to happen. So when you do get surprised like that, it's like, okay, great. This is it. This is what it's all about. So I do appreciate the tradition, and I love the tradition of the California painters. I love them a lot. But also, I love the contemporary paintings. I'm always studying and looking at modern art and the young artists, because it's rich, it's enlivening, I mean, it makes my heart beat faster, and that's what I like. I mean, I enjoy looking at other art. I mean, that's my job, is to look and look and look and look, and I love that. I'm a very lucky person to be able to do that. Years ago, in the turn of the century, the Monterey Peninsula was a very important painter's spot in the state of California. In fact, you weren't considered a painter unless you had come to the Monterey Peninsula and painted. And the reason it was so important at the time is because a lot of the California missions, the churches, they were all run down, they were all falling down and disheveled and derelict. not like we see them today. So there was this beautiful romantic mood about them. The Monterey Peninsula had a beautiful mood. It was the time period of the arts and crafts time of art history. And so the mood in painters was to be more small, handmade pieces and tonalistic. So the Monterey Peninsula is perfect for that. It was more foggy then, and the cypress trees and the cows grazing and the Carmel mission and ruins, very romantic and very beautiful. So that's why artists were drawn here. All important artists of California in the turn of the century came through the Monterey Peninsula. And that's why I was so happy here and why I wanted to, be part of that story. I mean, the mood is wonderful. There was an artist who made the statement that Point Lobos is the most beautiful meeting of land and sea in the world. Francis McComas, I believe, said that statement. I know it was used in advertisements to get people to come here, but it was originated by a painter. It's still beautiful. When I was here in the 70s and 80s, Cannery Row, the train still ran through Pacific Grove and Cannery Row, and it was magical and mystical, and it was more foggy then. There was more of a mystery to the region of Monterey. Things have changed. It's more sunny. There's more people that live here now. We used to say about the Monterey Peninsula that it was surrounded by a bubble and away from the world. The world didn't know about the Monterey Peninsula, so we were happy here in our little beautiful world, and young, and we were so happy. When you go out to the end of Kashawa and Carmel Valley, that's what we call the end of the world, because our world, our bubble ended there. In the Monterey Peninsula, it was a beautiful place to live, and it still is.